Okay, welcome to the third 2020 NHL Draft recap here at Scouching, and today we're looking at the Columbus Blue Jackets. So we're just going to jump right in, and at 21st overall, the Columbus Blue Jackets might have made the biggest reach I've ever seen in all my years tracking the NHL Draft, taking Yegor Chinakov from Avangard Omsk. Now, I have spent many hours since the NHL Draft trying to see why Yegor Chinakov was worth a first-round pick, let alone, according to Jarmo Kekalainen, ranked in their top 10. And let me tell you, he has an absolute cannon of a shot. There's decent skill in the offensive zone to open up passing lanes. Skating in a straight line, he's pretty quick and can fetch loose pucks and play hard. But outside of that, I really don't know exactly what it is the Columbus Blue Jackets see that lends him to be a potential impact player worth taking in the first round. His defensive game is okay. He's pretty active away from the puck, especially passing the puck. He's much more active on the power play, and he felt like a player that required a lot of auxiliary work done by his line mates to get the puck to him in the offensive zone where he could then finish the play. Now, I'm more than happy to be wrong about this, and Jarmo Kekalainen is really good at making people look really dumb in retrospect, but I don't know what Chinakov has done to warrant such a high draft pick outside of shoot the lights out in his first few KHL games this season. I'll be very curious to see how he develops, but especially when you look at the names that were left on the board, but I wouldn't be surprised if Chinakov is still playing over in Russia while the players drafted after him are impact players for their NHL teams. At 78th overall, the Columbus Blue Jackets took a player that I've profiled in a scouting report in Samuel Knazko. Now, I really like Samuel Knazko. I think there's a really interesting player there, and he just needs some development in his skating. He's an aggressive defenseman who can pinch into the offensive zone and really close out those breakouts effectively. He's a great puck distributor, able to see the ice really well and move pucks to line mates, and he just needs some more refinements in terms of his overall skating and power generation to generate the speed going up the ice that he will need. His skill is fine, but could use more training. But those two things are things that I think you can train pretty easily over the next few years, and I really trust the Columbus Blue Jackets development system to work with him and turn him into a serviceable defenseman, because I think there might be one there. Funnily enough, at 114th, they drafted Mikael Pyyhtiä. Pyyhtiä is a player who I saw quite a bit through tracking Samuel Knazko. I like Pyyhtiä's skill, and he can put a lot of weight through his shots, but I just don't really see the skating ability or the willingness to get to the front of the net to generate chances for himself that likely was what kept him off of most draft lists this year. I think you draft him and see what happens with him over the next few years, and you might end up with an interesting, skilled offensive winger, something the Columbus Blue Jackets seem to like to develop and put on their NHL team. And while he might have been drafted a little bit high for a typical late-round flyer that I would have recommended, he's still an interesting project to work on, and you don't really have to worry about him for another couple of seasons. At 145, they drafted defenseman Bjørgvik Holm. Now, I've seen Bjørgvik Holm play for the Norwegian national junior team as well as with the Mississauga Steelheads this year, and I found him to be a serviceable defensive defenseman. I think offense is a bit of an issue for him in terms of pushing play offensively and driving offensive transitions, but defensively he's very sound, and I think you can work on him to try to develop at least a competent offensive player. He had some good defensive metrics on a team that struggled a little bit defensively, but I think he's an interesting swing to take in this area of the draft, so we'll have to see what happens with him over the next few years. And with their last pick in the draft, they drafted Sam Johannesson. Now, Johannesson is a player that made some waves as a guy who's playing defense in the SHL and producing pretty well. I went and saw what I could of him, and I came away thinking that yes, he's a pretty shifty and aggressive offensive defenseman with some good skill, decent skating ability, especially stepping up from the offensive blue line, but his defensive play was really a big negative for me. I think in this range of the draft, you could definitely take a swing on him and just see what happens, and I certainly wouldn't say no if his name came up in this area of the draft as a potential draft pick. He certainly does have some good talent, and he has that talent in a very difficult league to play in. So I'll be very curious to see how his game evolves and changes over the next few years, but this is a player who I think leans much more heavily in the offensive direction, to the point where he's a bit of a defensive liability. So if he can shore up those defensive issues and still maintain that offensive aggressiveness, there could be an interesting defenseman here. So for the Columbus Blue Jackets, I'm going to give them a 2D. They're a really hard crop of players to judge on the whole, and the biggest wild card to me is most definitely Yegor Chinakov. And like I said, I'm happy to be wrong about Chinakov looking down the road and make Jarmo Kekalainen look like the biggest genius on the face of the planet. But no matter what I do, I just can't help but not see a tremendous amount of value in Chinakov outside of his shot. But more than anything, I would just be fascinated to have been a fly on the wall to sit in on those meetings and discussing that player and coming to the conclusion that that was their guy. I want to know what it was that pushed him to the top of their draft board so quickly this season, outside of a shooting bender in the KHL to start his year. But beyond that, I felt that they made some interesting swings. I really like Samuel Knazko's potential, but you're going to need to be patient. I like Mikael Pyyhtiä's skill, but I'm not sure there's enough to really package together into an NHL player, but he could be an interesting project. And Samuel Johannesson certainly shows offensive tools that were worth taking a flyer on. His defensive issues are noteworthy to me, but I think that those things you can work on, and as long as he can maintain his offensive flair and the offensive touch to the game that he has, he could be an interesting late-round pickup for them as well. So that's all for the Columbus Blue Jackets. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you can click all the buttons you see below me so you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you could subscribe on YouTube here by clicking join below, or on Patreon, where you get access to early access to videos, a Discord server, exclusive data visualizations, as well as data sheets for hundreds of drafted and undrafted prospects, or you could pick up some merchandise at the Scouchwear shop, where 50% of profits go to the Women's Sports Foundation. So that's all, and stay tuned for the next one where we go over the Toronto Maple Leafs.